The smell reaches you before anything else does. Meat, fat, and wood smoke, and the sweetness of something overcooked. All of it compressed into a room that is already too warm, already too loud, already containing more bodies than the air inside it can comfortably support. You are breathing other people's breath. You understand this immediately, in the specific way the body understands things before the mind has processed them, and the understanding produces a faint response at the back of your throat that you suppress, because suppressing it is the only available option. You are seated at one of the lower tables. Not the lowest. You are not nobody, but far enough from the head of the room that the king, when you can see him, appears at a distance that is both reassuring and insufficient. He is there. The room is organized around his presence the way all rooms in this building are organized around his presence, the way gravity organizes everything around its center without needing to announce itself. The candles are many and close, and they produce heat in addition to light, a fact that no one who designed this arrangement appears to have weighed against the comfort of the people sitting beneath them. Your collar is wrong. It was correct when you dressed this morning, and it is wrong now. Too close at the throat, the fabric stiffened with dressing, the whole construction of your upper clothing designed for appearance rather than for the experience of wearing it inside a room at this temperature for this duration. You don't adjust it. You don't touch it. You sit correctly, and you look at the table. The table is not a table. It is an argument. The food arrives in waves, carried by men who move with the practiced efficiency of people who have learned to be invisible while in motion. Dishes land without ceremony. A roasted bird of indeterminate species is placed within your reach, and its smell arrives with it. Rich and fatty and slightly gamey, the fat visible in the skin, the whole thing glistening in the candlelight with a quality that is not quite appetizing and not quite the opposite. You take a portion. This is not optional. Refusing food at this table is a statement, and statements at this table have audiences, and audiences at this table have memories. The meat is hot. Too hot. You burn the inside of your lips slightly on the first piece, and the burn is small but present, a minor injury that will announce itself for the next several hours every time you eat or drink or swallow. You don't react. You chew. The fat coats the inside of your mouth with a heaviness that doesn't dissipate the way lighter food dissipates. It settles. It accumulates. Around you, the noise is continuous and without pause. Voices overlapping, the sound of knives on wood and pottery, something being laughed at somewhere down the table, the particular sound of liquid being poured from height. The noise is not unpleasant exactly. It is simply more than the air should contain, and it sits on the hearing the way the fat sits on the palate. Thickly, persistently, without any sign of resolving. You reach for the wine. What you don't realize yet is that the wine is not for relief. It is sweet and heavy and arrives in a cup that will be refilled before it is empty, by people whose job is to ensure it is never empty, who have been given no instruction about what happens to a body that has been sitting in a hot room for 3 hours drinking sweet wine without pause. You drink because drinking is what the table does. The wine is warm from the room and sweet in a way that sits on top of the fat already sitting in your stomach, and the combination produces a sensation that is not quite nausea and not quite comfort, a kind of suspended discomfort, the body holding something in assessment, not yet decided. The room is louder than it was 10 minutes ago. This is the wine, distributed across 80 bodies simultaneously, its effects beginning to surface in the volume and confidence of the voices around you. Someone near the far wall is telling a story that requires significant physical demonstration. Laughter at intervals. The laughter is too loud, and you feel it in the chest more than you hear it. Your stomach is already pressing against your clothing. This is new. The clothing was fitted correctly this morning. You know it was fitted correctly, and yet the seam across the midsection is making itself known in a way it wasn't an hour ago. You breathe shallowly. Deeper breath is not currently comfortable. You take more food, not because you are hungry, because the dish is in front of you, and because the man to your left is taking more food, and because in this room at this table there is a rhythm to eating that is social rather than physical, that has nothing to do with hunger and everything to do with participation. The heat arrives properly around the second hour. It was warm when you sat down. It is now something else, a sustained, dense heat produced by the combination of candles, torches, fireplace, and the accumulated warmth of 80 bodies in an enclosed space, all of it pressing downward from the ceiling where it has collected and cannot escape. You feel it on the top of your head, on the back of your neck, along the line of your jaw where the collar presses closest. There is a faint dampness between your shoulder blades. You are aware of it the way you are aware of the lip burn, as a small private fact that you are carrying alone in a public room, that no one can see, but that occupies a portion of your attention that you would prefer to have available for other things. The man directly across from you has a face that has gone a specific color. Not ill exactly. Managed. The color of a man who is maintaining composure through an act of concentration. His eyes are slightly too fixed on the middle distance, his jaw moving at intervals that have become less about food and more about keeping the jaw moving, which is its own kind of management. You understand him. You do not look at him directly. Looking directly at him would be a form of acknowledgement. An acknowledgement would make real what both of you are currently pretending is not happening. Something is wrong with the air. Not dramatically wrong. The candles are burning, which means there is sufficient oxygen for combustion, which means there is sufficient oxygen. But breathing has become a consideration rather than an automatic process, something you are doing with awareness rather than without it. And the awareness is tiring in the low-level way that sustained small efforts are tiring. Then the king speaks. Not to you. Not yet. He speaks to someone near him. A comment, low and brief, and the people near him respond to it in the way that people near him always respond, with the specific calibrated performance of finding something appropriately amusing without overdoing it, of showing the right amount of engagement without showing too much engagement, of existing in the presence of a man whose good mood is everyone's oxygen and whose bad mood is a change in atmospheric pressure that the whole room feels simultaneously. You don't hear what he said. You see the response to it. You watch the ripple of it move outward from the head of the table, the slight reorganization of postures, the recalibration of expressions, the whole room making a small unconscious adjustment to whatever the temperature of him is in this moment. He looks up, not at you, in your direction. The difference between those two things is real and you understand it immediately in the body rather than the mind. A tightening across the chest, a momentary stillness, the body running a rapid assessment of whether you are the subject of the attention or simply in its path. You are in its path. He looks elsewhere. You exhale. You had not been aware that you stopped. The third course arrives, and your stomach receives the news poorly. It is not that you cannot eat. It is that the body has reached a point where eating is no longer a simple process. Food must now be negotiated past a stomach that has opinions, past a throat that has been occupied for 2 hours, past a general interior state that would describe itself, if it could describe itself, as full in the specific way that means. Anything additional will require active management. You take a portion. You eat it slowly. Slowly is the only tool available. The pastry is thick and the filling inside it is rich with something. Spiced meat, fat rendered into the pastry crust, the whole thing dense in a way that requires the jaw to do work it is increasingly reluctant to do. You chew. You swallow. You take a breath that arrives less completely than you would like. You take a small amount of wine because the alternative is having an empty cup, and an empty cup at this table is its own kind of visibility. The man across from you has stopped eating. Not stopped completely. He is maintaining the appearance of eating, moving food on his plate with the quiet deliberateness of someone rearranging a situation rather than participating in it. You understand this technique immediately. You are doing a version of it yourself. What you don't realize yet is that there is still a fourth course, and a fifth. The dizziness arrives quietly, the way the heat arrived, gradually, without announcement, already established by the time you notice it. It is not dramatic dizziness. It is the subtle variety, a slight uncertainty in the visual field, a minor delay between the room moving and your perception of the room moving. A feeling that the floor beneath you is reliable, but that your confidence in its reliability has decreased slightly since you last checked. The wine is part of this. The heat is part of this. The specific labor of maintaining correct posture and correct expression and correct participation in the social performance of this room for several continuous hours is part of this in a way that is harder to name, but no less real. Your hands, resting on the table, feel slightly remote. Not numb, present, warm, recognizable as yours, but operating with a fraction more distance between intention and response than usual. You reach for something, and the reach is fine. The reach is normal. The awareness of the reach is new. Around you the noise has not decreased. If anything, the room has gotten louder as the wine has done its work across the assembled company, and the loudness is no longer something you can absorb without effort. It sits on the hearing as weight. The laughter from somewhere down the table arrives at intervals, and each interval produces a faint response somewhere behind your eyes. Not pain, not quite, but pressure that suggests its proximity. You breathe, shallowly. Deep breathing is still not comfortable, and you have stopped expecting it to become comfortable. The king is eating. You watch him without appearing to watch him, which is a skill everyone in this room has developed to some degree of fluency. He eats with the certainty of a man who has never in his life had to consider whether it was appropriate to take more. His plate is serviced continuously by people whose attention to it never wavers. His cup is never less than full. His presence fills the upper end of the room the way heat fills a room, not through any act of effort, simply through the physics of what he is and where he is and the size of both. He is 54 years old. His leg, you have been told by someone, is a wound that has not healed properly in years. He moves with the specific economy of a man who has learned to preserve his body's cooperation for the moments that require it. At rest, at table, he is enormous and still, and the stillness is its own form of pressure. You look away, at your plate, at the middle distance, at nothing with any feature. The social mathematics of this room operate on principles that were established before you arrived and will continue after you leave. The precise calibration of proximity to favor, the management of visibility, the understanding that being noticed for the wrong thing in the wrong moment has consequences that are not metaphorical. Men have lost more than comfort in rooms like this. The room knows this about itself. The knowing sits in the posture of everyone at every table, held correctly, correctly composed, correctly present, for as long as correct presence is required. By the fourth hour, the body has simplified its concerns. It no longer cares about the social architecture of the room. It no longer tracks the king's direction of gaze or the posture of the men nearby. It has reduced its operational priorities to a short list. Breathe, remain upright, do not make a scene. The remaining food you move rather than eat. This is accepted practice at this stage of an evening. The pretense of continued participation, the plate still active, the hands still busy. Around you others are doing the same. The room has entered a later phase, the energy different now, lower, denser, the conversation less performance and more exhaustion, the laughter when it comes arriving from genuine tiredness rather than social effort. Your collar has not loosened. This is a physical fact that you find increasingly extraordinary, that the same amount of fabric that was around your throat this morning is still around your throat now, and the throat itself has somehow expanded in its intolerance of it, become more sensitive, less willing to accept the pressure without registering it. You have been aware of the collar for over an hour now. The awareness shows no sign of receding. The wine in your cup you leave. This is a small act of private decision-making in a room that has offered almost no private decision-making all evening, and you locate something in it. Not pleasure, but the faint contour of agency, the reminder that you have preferences, that the preferences are yours, that the room does not own them entirely. You are released, eventually, by the natural ending of the thing, not released by anyone. The meal ends the way these things end, gradually, through a series of small withdrawals, the room thinning by degrees, the social obligation dissolving as the king moves, and the hierarchy of departure follows him outward. You stand. The standing requires a specific negotiation between intention and execution. The body having been seated and compressed, and heated and fed, and waited for 4 continuous hours now being asked to redistribute itself vertically. Your knees understand the request. They comply. The compliance is not immediate. You move toward the door. The air in the corridor is different. The difference is so immediate and so complete that you stop for a moment without planning to. The coolness of it, the thinness of it, the absence of smoke and fat and 50 bodies, and the accumulated hours of everything that was happening in the room behind you. You breathe. Actually breathe. A full breath, the kind that goes somewhere, that moves something, that the lungs receive with what can only be described as gratitude. You stand in the corridor with the cool air moving over your face and your collar still wrong, but bothering you less now. The heat leaving your skin slowly. The dizziness receding to the point where the floor is simply the floor again and not a question. Your stomach is making its own slow inventory of the evening. The assessment is not positive. It is not, however, an emergency, simply a sustained reckoning. The body processing what it was given and organizing its objections in order of severity. You lean against the wall. Stone. Cold through the fabric of your back. You let it be cold. You let the cold come through. What you carry out of that room is not information. It is not knowledge about a king or a court or a century. It is the specific physical memory of what it feels like to sit inside a system that does not ask whether you are comfortable, that operates on a scale designed for display rather than survival. That will continue its operations tomorrow and the day after and the day after that with different bodies in the same seats, eating the same food in the same heat, under the same candles, and none of those bodies will be asked if they are all right, and none of them will say. You think about the men who do this every day. Not the king, not the powerful ones. The ones at the lower tables, the clerks, the attendants, the minor functionaries whose presence is required at this performance on a recurring basis, who dress in their uncomfortable clothing and sit in the hot room and eat the heavy food and manage the wine and the heat and the social fear and then go to their quarters and sleep and wake and do it again. You think about what that costs over time. Not dramatically, quietly, in the way that the body pays for things quietly over years, in the accumulation of small compressions and small heats and small managed discomforts, until the management becomes the person and the person cannot remember what they were before the management. The corridor is quiet. The stone is cold. The air is clear. You breathe. You are outside the room, and the room is behind you, and this, the cool air, the stone, the absence of performance, is the only luxury that was available tonight, and it is, standing here in it, enough. Not comfortable, not safe, not resolved, just outside, just breathing, just still here, at the end of the evening, with the night ahead and the body intact and the long walk back to whatever ordinary is. That is enough. Tonight, it is enough. These rooms outlasted everyone who sat in them. The food is gone. The candles are gone. The king is gone. What remains is the stone and the faint, unrecorded weight of every body that was required to be present inside it. The world before exists to sit inside what was never written down. If this stayed with you, the world before will be here when you're ready to return.